Hello there, Seraphim17 once again. This is my Ys VIII, Lacrimosa of Dana, Inferno walkthrough. We're going to be moving through the Pangaian Plains and the ruins of Eternia. So at the very beginning here, we're coming up against a Furionaton. This thing is actually pretty easy. It's an enemy that you'll come across a few times in the game, and it essentially is just a very large hitbox on a bird. You'll notice it does a backflip, a moonsault into a rush attack, same thing that the seagulls did on the beach. So you can beat him in pretty much the same way. If you have Hummel and Laxia in your team, you will get your bonus for attacking aerial enemies with the piercing attacks that they do, but you don't need to. At this moment in time, your Adol, if you've been following this run, is going to be packing some serious power right now. He's gonna really be separating the men from the boys. We're about to get even stronger as well, which is really nice, because at this moment in time, we've probably just got the capacity to craft the Savage Mask, which is an item that gives you 2.5 times damage of your skills when you use them, the battle skills, but they also take twice the amount of SP to use. So you get this lovely double damage, but then you drain your SP meter twice as much. However, there's an item known as a Saint's Ring, and then later on, once you get to the Path of the Water era, you'll be able to pick up the Ocean Hogeki, which are items that will completely half your SP consumption. So you can get all the benefits of the 2.5 times damage on your skills without the massive SP drain. And that's going to pretty much turn whichever character you choose to use with it into a nuclear force of damage. And in my team it's going to be Force Edge, Brave Charger, of course Adol doing his thing. But this will work on any character that you prefer, that maybe you're more comfortable with, or maybe you've gone more focused in with. Like, Sahad has incredible damage stats. If you were to focus on him, he would be able to put out some serious damage towards the end of the game. Laxia, she's very quick with a lot of multi-hitting moves. If you focused in on her, you'd be able to do some really good burst DPS when you need to. But I'm sticking to Adol because, you know, he's the main character and I'm kind of traditional like that. But here is the Panga Plains opening section where we're going to need a couple extra people. There are 3 people to get in the upcoming areas, 3 castaways for you to acquire. One of them involves looking at a campfire and then I think actively backtracking. I'm going to mess this one up, guys, and we're going to do it later on. But it unlocks one of my favourite castaways, which is an old lady called Sylvia, who to look at her you just think, oh, it's a generic JRPG old lady. We'll save her, she'll join the crew, she might do something interesting there. And then she whips off her cape and she's a crazy, like, gladiator, combat veteran, really tough warrior, so she completely goes against what you would anticipate her to be, and she seems pretty cool. The only downside to her is you don't really have her long enough to get a true sense of who she is as a character, and it'd be really cool if you could get her a little bit earlier, but alas, you have to get to this part of the island. But the creature that we were fighting just then is going to be dropping the next echelon of drops that we're going to use to upgrade our equipment. The Triceratop-esque monster that's just to our side here, he's passive until you attack him. You can attack it if you want to and get its drops and get its experience and everything, but I don't really do that. I only fight the one knobhead in these areas, which is this guy. And this thing doesn't look like much, but it has the ability to cancel into a charge attack at the drop of a hat, and it's a big, active, forward-moving attack. The rest of his attacks are pretty simple. He does a big claw slam into the ground, he can jump around a little bit, and he can do a tail attack to get you from behind him. But fundamentally, I'm going to keep in front of him, bait the charge, get the flash stack off it, and then proceed to whoop his ass. His drops are both Beast Bone, Beast Hide, Saurian Scales, and Primitive Meat. There's a quest coming up where you need Primitive Meat, so getting drops for that would be great. Beast Bones are going to enable you to do things on the next echelon of upgrades, and the Saurian Scale is an item that you will be using for certain things, but it's a little bit rarer than some of the others. One of the things I really like about Ys in general is the series seems to really like to give you drops. It's not a game where killing an enemy 50 times will give you 1 drop. You will generally get lots of drops, it's just however the rarer drops are definitely more difficult, and you will need to stack some equipment if you want to to get those. In the older games, for instance in Ys VII, there was a wonderful mechanic where once you killed an enemy, their bodies laid around afterwards, and you could hit them twice. And each time you hit them, you were rewarded with resources that they dropped. And if you hit them with a multi-hitting move, you could make them drop a ton of stuff. There's a character in the wind area of the game who casts a spell that fires a cyclone, like a turbine at somebody, some kind of tornado. And if you hit a body with that, it gives you like 50 pieces of drop. And it's really cool, because it even affects the frame rate with how many of it comes out of the body at that moment. And you can use that to get some really stacking those items, getting those resources. And unfortunately, in Ys VII, there isn't really much to do with the resources because they gate the progression so heavily. So I'm sitting on tons of resources and over 100,000 gold with nothing to buy right now, which is really frustrating, but it's still cool that you can do that, right? Whereas Ys VIII is very similar in the way that it gates things, but I do feel like there are a lot of accessories that they give you access to that you can be putting on your team members and building them up. And it must be said, folks, I think your team in Ys VIII is considerably better at helping you during battle than your team is in Ys VII. And I think the reason for that is simply because it was the first time they'd done it and the AI isn't quite as good. But the campfire just then, guys, if you go into your map right now, he's a friendly monster until you hurt him and then he'll attack you, so don't worry about him. But if you go into your menu, you will see a newly found green emblem telling you there's something to look at, and I believe it's in the previous plains that we just went through. So if you backtrack, you'll be able to pick up Sylvia. At this moment in time, I just kind of forgot where she was and assumed I'd find her in front of me, and that's not how it works. So to save yourself some time and get an extra castaway, if you do that now, you'll be able to acquire her. But that room just then, 3 of those big guys with how much damage they take, I'm not doing that. We just got some ancient lumber, which is really nice. You're going to need that to upgrade your barricade. But it seems, from my experience right now of playing through Ys VII at the moment, that the Ys games are very similar in their progression systems. They definitely enjoy whatever the next area is, and the resources dropped in the next area are the fuels that you will need to get to the next level of damage and the next level of strength. And it's kind of a system as old as the hills, isn't it? It's a system that a lot of classic games use. Myself, I kind of prefer it when you can break out of that rigid guideline, but I understand why they do it. Whereas in this game, I do feel like some of the stuff that's meted out to you, you can perhaps get past it a little bit, because you can get to some strong enemies and get some early skills. But even then, as good as the skills are, and the skills are amazing, they're not the same impact on you as the equipment is. If we could get some, like if you could get the Savage Mask any earlier, it would be insane. It would be really cool. But for obvious reasons, they don't really want you doing that. But I really want to do that, and other than infinitely jumping and skipping half the game, there just doesn't seem to be a cohesive way of doing it. But right now, as you look at the map, I can't warp anywhere, and this means that we're now going to be going and interacting with the crystal and either controlling Dana for a while or going to the next sequence in the story. And this just so happens to be the red-haired swordsman sequence. So we're back in the comfortable hands of one of the main protagonists as we flip around. Dana is really interesting in these sequences because I don't know this for certain, guys, but from what I've read, there are a lot of things that were added to this part of the game that weren't originally present in the PSP version. And a quick Google search will remedy the answers that I'm about to completely ruin. But I believe that potentially the swapping of the styles that Dana gets, where she turns green and has a hammer, when she turns yellow and has the double knives like Voldo, I think that might be a new addition to the PlayStation 4 version. I don't know if the original game had that. I think Dana kind of stood as an opportunity for exposition and a little bit of combat, and that was about it. I think they fleshed it out a little bit with the spirits. And I'm not entirely certain, but there is a dungeon that is exclusive to this time period that you can do with Dana that's optional, where you go through these doors, and every time you increase her approval, or her virtue I think it's called, you can then access a deeper layer. And there's a bunch of optional bosses that are all those kind of flying metallic enemies that you're going to see me face later on. And then at the end of it, there is an optional boss, which is a character in the game that I won't spoil, which is a really cool fight. And I don't know if that was in the original. I feel like it might have been added to the PlayStation 4. So if you're wondering if there's anything added to this version that warrants the $60, because I've noticed a lot of people, when they talk about this game in particular, because it's a PSP Vita title that's been ported to the consoles, it's just been released on Switch as well, if you're wondering. People look at the price tag, and they kind of have that recoil, don't they, where they go, hang on a second, $60 for the port of a Vita game, a handheld game? That seems kind of steep. And I completely understand that perspective, especially if you're one of the more frugal gamers who doesn't buy a lot of games a year, and you buy one game and play the death out of it before you buy the next one, and maybe you get 1 to 2 for a full, sequence of time. But I feel like the amount of time that you can put into this particular game is more so than a lot of games. Some of the games that you get right now, unless you're into the competitive multiplayer, you'll beat the campaign in maybe 5 to 7 hours. You'll maybe look at some of the extras, but that's about it. Whereas, the first time playing this game, I put 50 hours in it when I was trying to have a good time, see things, but I wasn't essentially taking it slow. You can invest a ton of time in this if you want to, especially with the grinding, especially with the farming and getting the resources. The game itself is pretty lengthy. It's about a 20 to 30 hour campaign, and for $60, I feel like $30 would be great. But $60 isn't bad either. You know, when you compare it to how much you pay to go to the cinema for an hour or two, I feel like the enjoyment factor there is high enough to demand the price. And don't get me wrong, folks, I love me some cheap games. Cheap games are amazing. I always buy things in the sales if I can. But for the amount of enjoyment that I've got out of this title, and the amount of enjoyment I think you might get out of this title, I wouldn't look at the $60 as this big barrier of entry. I would just look at it as every other game that you've begrudgingly paid that amount of money for, At the end of the day, it is intrinsic to the value that you get from it, and some people, $60 will be too much and they'll regret it, and for those people, I'm sorry that you have that buyer's remorse, but for me, I've already put about 65 hours into the game, and I will happily play it again, because it's really, really cool, and I enjoy it a lot. But it will come down, undoubtedly. The prices will come down. I know on PC it's about 30 quid, and I don't think 30 quid is a problem at all for what you get. But this is Eternia, and this sequence is hilarious, dude. Every 5 yards there's a cutscene, so every time you see it dip to black and come back, that's me editing out talking. You cannot move at all in this area without some plot exposition being handed to you, and as far as the plot goes, this is at the point where things start to get really interesting, because you now have a vested interest in both Dana and Eternia. You've seen it in its prime, you're now seeing it in its ruination, and it does definitely blend the two time periods well together. It has a nice intrigue going. But when you come into this room, you're going to get attacked by a bunch of rats with chicken drumsticks. Crazy bunny jerks, strange biker gang dudes. I don't even know what it is. They die really fast though, so you don't have to worry about that fight. And now you can go back outside and meet up with Thanatos, who, as you might have guessed it, is the pirate who has been leaving all the messages around the island marked T, which I've been ignoring because it's a mandatory piece of cutscene that you can't skip for some reason. And also the parental figure of Ricotta, who's been helping her on the island, the person who taught her how to read and helped educate her and everything. Here is one of the titular testicles, everybody's favourite. Go into the insect repellent in the menu, get rid of it. If you strike this particular enemy, it will release more hornets, so don't do that unless you're looking to farm or something. And then there we have a big pearl. An item that you haven't really seen me interact too much with. Ooh, and the Hope Stone! So this is where you naturally get the Hope Stone. The Hope Stone gives you 40 strength, 40 defense, and I think 100 HP. Oh no, I'm completely wrong. 20 strength, 20 defense, and 400 HP. Which is pretty good if you're wanting to stack a little strength. The problem is, right now, we're about to get something that's going to completely blow that kind of an item out of the water, and you don't really need it. But earlier on, if you crafted it, you had a 20 strength advantage, which early on is really good. Ys statistics are really interesting in the early game, because the difference of 10 strength makes a big difference. And I can confirm it's the same in Ys VII. Leveling up once or twice can make the difference between dealing really good damage to a boss to dealing almost nothing to them, which is a really bizarre way of handling it, but once you get used to it, you can kind of work your way around it. Although it must be said, guys, there is a bird boss in Ys VII that is the most ridiculous thing I've probably fought in an Ys game, because it has about 20 moves. All of them have got ridiculously long and active hitboxes. The flash guard in that game is nowhere near as functional as it is in this game. If anything, it's a testament to how shit the mechanic works in that game that they changed it for this one. And it has 40,000 HP on Nightmare. 40,000 HP and my average attack is doing 60 damage. When I say it was a literal nightmare, I mean it. It really was miserable. An absolutely miserable time. And the worst part, as we go into the guiding Dappling, which is another Dana section, is that it's a really fun fight. It has super cool patterns, it has really good dodges, it's tense, it's tough, and it's very challenging, but it has too much HP. If it had 20,000 HP, it'd probably be my second favourite fight in that game so far. But 40 fucking thousand? I hit that thing with 5 extra attacks. Can you imagine doing 5 extra attacks? In this game, most bosses will only be able to take 2 or 3 tops. 5! Gosh, I was pissed off last night. But anyhow, this isn't Ys VII, this is Ys VIII. And we're doing more navigation here through this wonderfully decorative and baroque kingdom. This is one of those weird moments where you're going to have to talk to some random person to trigger a sequence. And I'm so used to the game triggering sequences on proximity triggers to, like, tripwires, that I come all the way over here and I'm like, hang on a second, I can't go this way? And then I turn around and I realise on the map I'm supposed to talk to the child. But talk to the child, and then it will unlock the next sequence. If you're interested in speedrunning, this game is ridiculous right now. I watched a speedrun of this game that was about 2 hours long, and I thought it looked really, really fun. They did sequence break a couple of areas, but fundamentally they played a lot of the game, and they fought a ton of bosses, which I really like when speedruns actually, you know, play the game. As much as the glitch stuff is really interesting, when they play the game quickly and effectively, I think that's equally as interesting too. But then I saw another one. 20 minutes. They'd brought it down from 2 hours to 20 minutes. And it was crazy. He found a way to somehow confuse the game into thinking one of the early side quests in the Castaway Village was one of the later ones, and it jumped to the end of the game. I have no idea how people find that stuff, but it's absolutely fascinating.